Let's give it up for Jasper.
Thanks. Oh no. Okay, all is not lost. Can everyone hear me okay? Cool. Yeah. It's hard to tell up here. All right, so title of my talk today is Products Are About People. As mentioned, I have an extremely long name that doesn't fit on most slides. Jonathan Sherman Presser, most people call me Jasper, let's keep it simple. And I'm a senior product manager at LinkedIn, where I focus on video. More about that in a second. So I wanted to kind of frame this talk about three things today. And hopefully you can walk away with a little bit of how I think about building products. Specifically, that to be a great product manager, you first need to really understand people and their problems. Then you need to understand how to enable the people on your team to solve those problems. And finally, you need to be able to measure success in people-friendly terms. But what might give a little bit of color to how I think about product management is a bit of my background. So, a bit about me. I started my career in product at a small startup called My New Place. They did apartment rental search. It was long enough ago that you cannot find a non-pixelated version of their logo on the internet anymore. And from there, I moved to Comcast, a big cable company, but they had a recently opened innovation lab based in Silicon Valley, where I worked in a team that was focused on social TV, second screen, and better discovery of what to watch on TV. From there, I took a little bit of a sidetrack away from product for a little while, spent some time at Trinity Ventures, a venture capital firm, advising investments at the kind of intersection of the internet and television. Went to business school at Stanford, spent some time at Spotify in business development, working on content licensing, both for partnerships with mobile carriers, as well as for content licensing on a kind of nascent video over-the-top product that they were developing at the time. And then for the last about 3 years, I've been at LinkedIn. And LinkedIn's mission, is you probably know, is about creating opportunity, economic opportunity for every member of the global workforce. And what my team specifically focuses on is how can we make LinkedIn not just a place you might come every so often when you're looking for a new opportunity, when you're accepting connection requests, when you're updating your profile, but a place you might come every single day to get the news and information, to build the relationships, have the conversations you need to do your current job better. To learn about the things that you need to advance in your roles, to engage with others who share your interests. And obviously, video is increasingly important as a medium by which people connect with one another, share knowledge, and learn things. And so my team is focused on really bringing that into the ecosystem as a first-class citizen. But maybe a bit about my background first. It's a little unconventional. As a product manager, I was an English major as an undergrad. Do we have a show of hands of any English majors in the room here? Okay, there is hope for you guys yet. I was not just an English major. I wrote my senior thesis on 17th century epic poem by John Milton, Paradise Lost, and did the natural thing you would do with an English degree with that concentration, which is move to Europe and design and lead bicycle tours for a living. And at this point, you might kind of be like, wait, what does this guy possibly have to tell us about how to be a good product manager? But what I would contend is that these experiences, fundamentally, they're about understanding people. They're about empathy for people. They're about understanding what motivates them, understanding their desires and needs, and how to get them to do the things that are going to make them successful and happy. And so what I want to kind of impart to you guys today, my thesis is that to build great products, first things first, you need to understand people. And the subtitle I almost gave a talk was everything I learned about product management I learned by studying English and leading bicycle tours. But let's get into the bulk of it. Okay, so first, let's talk about who we build products for. Products fundamentally are made for people, and I want to start this by telling a little story about my first experience as a bicycle tour leader. So imagine you're here in France. Your job is to take people on 6-day vacations they're spending a lot of money for, and they want to have a really amazing time. But all kinds of unforeseen things happen along the way, and you have to kind of figure out how to make them happen. And so to train you for this job, what you do is you take all prospective leaders and you bring them on a 3-day mock trip where you run through a bunch of scenarios that you might encounter in an actual trip. So bear with me, transport yourself, if you will, to southwest France or in Bordeaux and you're on a trip, and I am pretending in this mock trip to be the leader of a trip. I've never led a trip before, and we're running through the following scenario. Everyone's super excited. They're going on a beautiful bike ride, and they pass this vineyard that this couple who is in town from California is super excited about, but they're really bummed because this is one of their favorite wineries, and it's Sunday, and it's not open. And they're really upset, and they come to you and they say, like, the trip is ruined. What do you do? So my immediate solution was like, I know that I got it all figured out. We're going 30 kilometers due south next day. This thing will be the opposite direction, but we can send 50 kilometers that direction. It'll be open by 9 a.m. We get them in the van. We get them in a taxi that direction. The van catches up and give everyone else lunch. And all of a sudden, everything's going to be fine. And the guy who's training me stopped me and put his hand on my shoulder and said the following thing to me. People aren't about solutions. They're about relief. This thing, this one sentence, or actually two sentences, is a mantra that I have carried with me throughout my entire product career. And what this means is, a lot of us think as product managers, our job is to take an idea, a concept, from idea stage to execution. And that is a big part of the job, but to do that really well, you first need to understand what problem you're trying to solve. If you ask, like this famous Henry Ford quote, you ask people what they want, they'll tell you they want a faster horse. You really understand what is motivating them. What are their needs? What are their desires? What are their fears? That's where great products come from. And your job as a product manager is not to be attached to any particular solution, but to really own and understand the problem. Own the problem, not the solution. And the reason it's so important to own the problem is that most of the time, you're going to be wrong about the solution. I have made way more products in my life that were not successful than ones that are successful. And if you ask anyone who spent a lot of time as a product manager, they will tell you the same thing. You have a bunch of hypotheses, you want to try them out. Sometimes they're going to be right, sometimes they're going to be wrong. The important thing is you learn from them and you figure out what is a better solution. Own the problem, not the solution. People don't care what the solution is. They care whether it meets their needs. Second, I think there's another thing that was encoded in that statement, is that great products make people feel something. Let me give you some examples. They might make you feel really productive. They might make you feel really efficient. They might make you feel inspired. And there's two logos here because there's different ways to make people feel inspired, and they're responding to slightly different problems. But at the end of the day, these things are all about first understanding the problem before you get into the solutions. And so, let's talk about how you actually might do this. So this is a photograph I took a few weeks ago at one of my favorite takeout places called Old Jerusalem in the Mission. And as you can see here behind the counter, there are 5 tablets from online ordering services. So there's one from Uber, there's one from Postmates, there's one from Eat24, there's one from Grubhub. I can't remember where the 5th one is from. And there's a fax machine in the back from DoorDash. And you look at this and you're like, what's the problem here? Maybe the problem is there's really a ton of fragmentation in the online ordering space that's really stressful for the restaurant owner. Decent thought, but why don't we ask the restaurant owner, find out? So, talked to him, and I asked him, I said, wow, there's a lot of iPads. Which of these do you like the best? He said, Uber takes the highest cut. We had to negotiate really hard with them, but they bring the most business. And boom, there you have it. There's the problem you're trying to solve. How do you help a restaurant grow its business? That's the problem that a great product is trying to solve. So, as you think about how do I get to the problem, what is the right problem, just keep asking why. Keep asking why and why and why until there's no more whys, and then that is the problem you're trying to solve. So now we might get to the point where it's all right, well, how do we actually do that? So products are made by people. Let's talk a little bit about the team that you have to help solve some of these problems. Remember, your job as a product manager is to stay super focused on the problem and then figure out how to solve it. One thing I can't stress enough is, again, we think of our job as a product manager sometimes as building a product. It's a little bit bigger than that. Product management is about the process of getting to the right solution. So let's actually take a look at our team. We're back in France. All these people in this picture look super happy because we're in this beautiful place together. But this is actually not unlike what your team is like as a product manager. all of these people, they look happy because they're having an amazing time, and your goal is to help ensure that they have the time of their life on this vacation. But you know that in order to do that, you actually need to get them all in this place at the same time, because there's going to be an amazing lunch you prepared for them. But everyone wants to do different things. These people on the left here, they're super serious cyclists, and they just want to put in as many miles as possible every single day. And this is kind of problematic because you can't chase them down in case they get a flat tire. And these folks over here are wearing really fancy bicycling equipment, but it turns out they actually just want to go to fancy wineries all the time. And this woman here is being a good sport, but she actually hates cycling, and she's only here because her husband made her go on the trip. And she would much rather be hanging out at the spa at the hotel, but she doesn't want to look like a wimp in front of everyone else. And by the way, all of these people are paying you $5,000 a week, so you work for them, so they're always right. How do we solve this? How do we get them to do the thing that we know is going to make them successful? This is the same thing as your team that you work on. My team right now at LinkedIn is about 45 people, which is a huge amount of people to kind of keep track of. If you think keeping track of 15 people in the French countryside is hard, keeping track of 45 people, we're kind of off doing different things, is really hard. And some of them are engineers, some are designers, some are data scientists, some are marketers. And they all have different incentives and motives. Maybe this is an engineer, a front-end engineer, who really wants to always try the next framework for building in JavaScript. And maybe this person is actually really wants to get promoted, and so he over-engineers everything so that he can have a really big technical infrastructure achievement to tout in his next promotion cycle. And maybe this guy who looks super quirky and weird over here is our data scientist who needs to have statistical significance for every single decision, but some of the things, you just kind of have a sense it's working. And none of them report to you, and you can't make them do what you want. You can't force them to. So, how do we do this? Your job is to help the team be successful, right? And the best way to help make them successful is to respond to this pop-up. Is to advance a slide. Is to advance a slide. Is just to wing it. Yeah. So it's really harder without the second half of the deck. Let's try this. And this. Aha! This is how we do it. Give the team a shared understanding of what success is. So, I'll give you an example from a product that I worked on when I was at Comcast. The problem we were trying to solve was to help people in the midst of 700 channels you have in your cable package figure out what to watch that's relevant to you right now. And we actually built a couple different products that tried to solve this problem. The first was called Tuna Fish, and the idea was if you could see in real time what your friends were checking into, kind of like Foursquare on TV, that would be an amazing way to kind of replicate this offline thing that you go to a dinner party and someone's like, oh, have you seen Veep? And you're like, no, I've never seen Veep. That sounds interesting. And then what if you could see when they were watching Veep in real time and be like, oh yeah, that is great, I'll tune to it. Then we had another attempt at the same problem. We tried it in a little different way, which is hey, why don't you just tell us what you like? And it turns out that any given show you like, chances are it's on somewhere at some point in time in the 700 channels you have that mean nothing to you. But the shared understanding of success was, how do we help people connect to the stuff that they love and watch and make it super easy for them to watch on TV? And when you do this, when you give the team a shared understanding of success, it's great because it allows you more bandwidth to focus on understanding other problems and adjacent problems and thinking about strategy. So a lot of times we think about, as a product manager, that our job is to kind of basically be that hub, right, in the center of all the spokes, and that you need to have your fingers in the marketing plan, you need to have your fingers in the engineering decisions, you need to have your fingers in QA, you need to have your fingers in everything. And that, when you're really busy running around answering people's questions, that's success. The worst days I have are the days where I am running around answering people's questions all day, every day, because it means I'm not really thinking about people. We call them members at LinkedIn, but your customers or users, whatever you call them, and their problems. Being a PM, a great PM, actually does not mean having all the answers. Being a great PM actually means giving the team the tools they need to figure out the answers themselves, to execute on their own, to make good decisions, to understand hey, is this new JavaScript framework really going to help us solve this problem for our members next week? Or is it the kind of thing we could try once we know something else is working? If they can make those kinds of decisions on their own, First of all, the entire team can move way faster. Second of all, you can have confidence that they're all going to be moving in the same direction. And third of all, you can start thinking about other kinds of problems that you want to solve. Related to this, there's no one best way to run a team. Some teams need a lot of structure, some teams don't. Sometimes it depends on the personalities of the people involved. Sometimes it depends on kind of the maturity of the project or the nature of the project. So, for instance, like I work with engineers where I could say, build me a view of the most popular things on TV right now, and literally that sentence and a half, they can go and by the end of the week come back with something to me with no further guidance. I've worked with engineers for whom a similar scope thing, I need to provide like a decision tree of what happens at every different state. And some of it is just like what those engineers need. Some of it has to do with the nature of the project. So if you're working on something that has a ton, let's say, of horizontal dependencies, or where the stakes for making early decisions really matters because you can't backtrack on those decisions later, you might need to do a lot more specification up front. And you can be a lot less kind of like fast and loose and figure it out as we go. It sort of depends on the needs of the team. So remember again, your job is to understand what the team needs from you. Sounds familiar. It's about understanding their problems. Here's how I think about it. When I'm joining a new team, or when I'm interviewing for a product role, I ask two questions. First, what's going well? And what could be going better? And I generally ask this to every single person I meet, because I kind of want to see, like, do they all answer it the same way or not? You ask this question to a bunch of people on the team, you actually start to understand, like, what are the areas where I can give them the most help? What are the areas where things are really singing? And it also helps you evaluate, am I a good fit for this team? Like, some product managers are going to love the stage where you're at ideation and you're in front of the whiteboard with a designer really working. And some product managers love execution. They love managing Jira backlogs and just like seeing tickets get closed out and seeing things move across a Scrum board. And others like love living in data and finding all the levers and leverage points to run A/B tests. And different teams will need different things from you. And you'll be most successful if you're at a team where what they need from you is the thing that you like to offer. And so I have met with teams where I'll ask these questions and when I've interviewed for jobs, and it will be clear that like what they really need is something like execution help. Like they really need help figuring out how to get processes in place to like move things ahead on a regular cadence. Like that's not really where I love to be. I would much rather be kind of more in the vision and strategy place. And so it's easy in those situations to say like, hey, maybe this is not the right role for me, but I can tell you someone who might be. So as you think about approaching different product roles, think about that and think about like what is the team that you want to be on? What is the kind of thing that you want to do? And does this product, does this team, does this level of maturity of where they are in the product lifecycle match to that? Am I talking really fast?
No.
Cool. Team and process is a product too. It's all about people, their problems, understanding their motivations, what makes them tick, and how to help solve those. Okay. Last but not least, metrics are for people. How do you know when you're actually being successful at doing the thing that you and the team have set out to do? How do you know you're closer to solving that problem? What are the signs? Great metrics are a really good way to do this, but even before we get there, the one thing that's most useful is to be able to answer the following question, or rather, complete the following sentence. We'll know we're successful when. Have a clear vision for what that looks like. Maybe it's a state of the world. Maybe it's a state of a metric. Maybe it's like, we'll know we're successful when we're processing $1 billion of transactions a week. Maybe it's, we'll know we're successful when people are using our product every day. We'll know we're successful when some adoption metric, like people come back and use it week over week. But have a sense of what this looks like, and then you can start to map what great quantitative metrics would tell you whether you're hitting this thing. Briefly about what good metrics look like, I tend to think that they fall into 3 big categories, or rather they fulfill 3 criteria. First is they capture value to people. Going back to that first thing, like you have your statement of what success looks like, make sure the metric that you track at the top line actually aligns to that thing. If success for you is people use your product every single day because it's the kind of thing people need to use every day in order for it to work, like an alarm clock, track daily active users. Don't track weekly active users. If people are using an alarm clock once a week, it's probably not a very good product for solving the problem you're trying to solve. If the thing has a different, like a weekly or monthly cadence, maybe that's what you should track as weekly active users. but make sure it aligns to how you understand the use case and the problem that you're trying to solve in really people-centric terms. And it's really good, I think, to do this in terms of thinking about like what are the users like and how do you count the users. If, again, let's go back to an example of you have a product that people are using it every single day, don't measure daily sessions, measure daily users. Because if it turns out a few number of people are generating all the sessions, you're not really solving a problem for a lot of people. Second, make sure they're straightforward to measure. It can be tempting to be like, we have a very concrete, very narrow idea of what success looks like, and therefore we are going to constrain our metric in a very precise way. Generally, trying to keep it straightforward to measure not only reduces the overhead of implementing it, but it also makes it so it can't be gamed. And if it turns out that there's a lot of technicalities baked into the definition of a metric, it becomes really easy for a team to go and try to like cater to the definition of the metric as opposed to the actual value that you're trying to create. And this is super important because metrics are an amazing tool for motivating people to do the right thing. Like you put a metric and a metric goal in front of people, they will go meet it, they will figure out what to do in order to meet it. So make sure that there's only one right way to meet it, which is by actually solving the problem. Finally, this should seem like a no-brainer. Great metrics are easy to understand. Like everyone on the team should get what it is. And beyond that, it should be easy to understand how different decisions would move that metric. So it should be easy for your team to figure out like, if I do this, it is likely to move this top line metric in the following way. And maybe it's not super like mechanical. Maybe it's not a really easy conversion funnel where it's like more clicks on search results is going to land with more people on landing pages, which is going to land with more people actually getting down my purchase funnel. Maybe it is just that, we know that if more people are sharing things, we're going to have more great content in a feed, which is going to make the feed more valuable. And you can sort of know that people will come back to the feed more frequently if people are sharing things more. Let me give you a couple of like concrete examples of this that I've used in my career. Okay, I'm going to go back to leading bicycle trips for a moment. These people look like they're having a grand old time. It's a lot of work to actually ensure that's the case. So when I worked for Backroads about 10 years ago, they did something like 16,000 guests every year. Now they do about 30,000 every year, and almost all of that growth, and all of the growth through their entire trajectory, has come from word of mouth references. People saying, I had an amazing time on this trip. You should come on it too. You should think about going on it. So what do they measure? They measure Net Promoter Score. They ask all the guests when they finish the trip this question, on a scale of 1 to 10, would you recommend this to a friend? Turns out like you know exactly how to drive this. So when I took over designing this trip in Bordeaux, it was something like the 23rd percentile or so in the company for Net Promoter Score. It was not performing very well. Guests didn't really like it. So what did I do? I went and I asked a bunch of the people who led the trip, what's going well, what's not going well, what makes it easy to fulfill the promises we're making to guests, what makes it hard, and then I read through a bunch of the guest feedback to understand the ways in which it was meeting or not meeting their problems. And then I kind of hypothesized that the problem here is that this is a trip that's focused on wine. It's not enough focused on wine. We need to actually improve it to make it easier to run, to give people more flexibility to go to the right wineries. We made a bunch of changes. The next year, we ran the Net Promoter Score survey, and it was the 78th percentile in the company. Sort of easy to understand metric that captures the real value you're trying to provide, and you know how to move it. At Comcast, I worked on a little labs app called What's On. This was one of our second attempt to try to figure out how do we make it super easy to find out what's on TV that's relevant to me right now. And we're like, well, what would success look like? Success means you open up our app and you figure out what to watch within 30 seconds and you tune the channel. So what do we measure? We measure the number of people who open the app and tune within 30 seconds every single day. Because if more people are doing that, we're successful, and we can figure out what to do to get that time to be smaller and to increase the number of people we're doing. So those are a couple examples around metrics. And yeah, so before we move on to Q&A, just to summarize, being a great product manager is about people and understanding them, understanding their problems, understanding how to help a team collaborate and move together to solve those problems. And finally, how to measure success in people-friendly terms so you actually know when you're actually solving them. And with that, open up for some Q&A. I'm happy to answer questions about anything here or anything else you want to talk about product-wise.
Perfect. Just raise your hand and answer.
Hi. Hi, Jasper. Thank you so much. That was a fantastic talk. I have more of a general question on product management. What advice would you have for the product managers in the room who are interested in becoming a product manager at LinkedIn? How do you get in the door? Is there a competitive landscape? How do you stand out?
Great question. So I think, it's funny, it's like a lot of the stuff we look for is, in some way, shape, or form, this. It is really like, can you look at a thing and articulate why a product is great? What does it do that works well? Like, do you understand the mechanics that make products work and the problems they solve, and can you kind of diagnose and articulate those things? And then can you do this kind of like second half, which I would describe kind of like broadly as like getting shit done. And there's a lot of flavors of that, which is like, how do you think about prioritizing a roadmap? How do you think about measuring success and like the right metrics? How do you think about working with engineers if you have a technical or non-technical background? How do you deal with like thinking about the landscape, the market landscape, or the business landscape you're operating in? Those are the things we look for. We kind of hire at all levels. We hire associate PMs who are like straight out of college. We hire PMs who have a couple years of experience. Generally, like just as a level of calibration, like a product manager level person generally has like 4 or 5 years of product management experience. Because we're a big company, there's a lot of complexity in our ecosystem, and we want to see people have experience making stuff happen, making complex things happen, and really providing that value.
How's it going? So I had a question.
Okay.
So this is tactical, but
Yeah.
I was wondering how fast should a product move from the mock-up phase into prototype phase? How long do you iterate in that prototype phase? And then either push it to launch or go?
As fast as possible is generally the answer. From the standpoint of like, the sooner you can start validating your hypotheses and actually getting real data to see, hey, is this solution the right one, the better. And sometimes like you don't actually need to ship anything to do that. You can build like a super low key or lo-fi like paper prototype and take it to people and be like, does this make sense? Sometimes it's the kind of thing where it's like an entire system has to work together in certain ways in order to validate it, and you kind of have to build something in order to validate whether your theory is right. But generally, like the faster you can get something into people's hands, the better. And what timing that is and what the thing that you're trying to get into people's hands is should kind of be focused around like, what question do we want to answer by getting into that phase? And you may not need to answer all of the questions up front. Maybe like there's 3 critical things that you think that need to work in order for this product to be successful. Like, what is the thing you can do to test thing A? What is the thing you can do to test thing B? What is the thing you can do to test thing C? And just kind of continue to iterate on that. But the faster you can get it in front of real people, the better. And once you've launched, it's like, I like to say like, once you've launched, it's actually like not the end, that's the beginning of the race. Like, once it's out there, that's when like the real iteration starts. Because that's when you actually start really learning at scale what's working and what's not.
Hey Jasper, this is great. I had a quick question on, so you, as a product manager, you deal with so many different people, like designers, programmers, XYZ. But you as a PM, you're not really an expert in any of those fields, but you said you really help them solve problems and guide them and inspire them. But like in my background, I don't have a technical background. So how do you really do that? Like what advice would you have for folks who are not experts in coding?
So, for context, I have no technical background. I took a night school class in PHP like 7 years ago or something when I was just feeling insecure about like not being able to contribute to technical conversations in my product role. But I'm pretty sure I remember almost nothing from that. I don't have a like design background. I did some graphic design in college, but like I'm not a UX designer. You add value in a couple different ways. It's like you build and demonstrate credibility. So like helping people, one, like articulate problems is actually a really powerful skill. Like getting everyone on the same page is a lot of the value that you bring. And so like, how do you talk to a designer versus how do you talk to an engineer and gain their credibility? It's like actually by getting them all to sort of speak the same language is a lot of the value that you bring. And sort of the way you do that is like make sure that they're all focused on the same problem and make sure that you have a really clear understanding of that problem, because that's the value that you bring. Like the value you bring is the understanding of that problem and the ability to help expedite that happening. Now, like, how do you establish credibility in doing that? Like that's really hard, right? And it doesn't happen overnight, especially like how do you gain the respect of engineers? A lot of it is actually like asking good questions, like helping them make decisions. So like people come to you and they say, like, should we do A or B? And you're like, I have no idea. Like I have no idea whether React is better than like Angular. Like, well, okay, like what's the problem we're trying to solve? Front-end engineer, and they're like, well, this, and it's like, okay, like what are some of like the things that like React does? Will it have an impact on this other thing that we care about? And help them like work through decision-making processes, and that is a way that you gain credibility. A second thing is small wins. Like the big product vision, like the enormous thing that changes everything, like that's a long road. And most of the things you work on, especially early in your career, like you're not going to own that huge thing. You're going to own like a smaller thing. But like gaining the trust of the team by helping them like establish small wins along the way is really valuable. And if you can help guide them to these like smaller things that they feel great about, they feel like they're making momentum, that's an instant way to kind of gain trust of people and to demonstrate that you're bringing value to them, even if like you can't do the things that they do.
Hi. So I have a quick question from a different perspective. So if you have a product manager who's pretty attached to like a few ideas of like features and things that they want to build forward, how do you convince them to steer away from some of these ideas, especially if the data doesn't support that these will be value added?
It's a great question. Saying no is like one of the most important and hardest things as a product manager. It's gonna sound like a real cop-out, but like, make sure that people are focused on the problem. Like, really press them on like, all right, they come to you with an idea, you think like, yeah, this is probably not a very good idea. You're like, all right, first off, like, tell me how it addresses the problem. Make sure that like, it actually addresses the problem, and it's not just like a thing that sounds really exciting. And then get them to like unpack the reasons that they think it's a really powerful way to address that problem. Like, what are essentially like the assumptions that are baked into this? And I think if you can kind of walk people through that process, sometimes they will like sort of figure out like, this all hinges on our ability for like X to happen, and like, man, maybe we're gonna get X to happen, maybe we're not. So I think that's one way to do it. There's also like the deferral technique, which is like, that's a great idea. Like, let's get to that in version 2. Like, that will be amazing if we do these other things first. And like, it sounds like a blow-off, and it's not really meant to be that. It's more like making sure that like you solve the simple and the small things first before you get to the bigger things. The last piece is like, sometimes you just like need to let people do what they're gonna do. And like, letting people make their own mistakes and learning from them is actually like a really important thing. It can be really hard when you're like trying to ship on a deadline and you're like, this like tangent I know is going to like take us off this and it's going to distract us, but like ultimately the team needs to feel ownership of the thing that they're working on. And I think I found in the past it's like letting them kind of do their own thing and like figure out that it was right or wrong is sort of the best way for them to come around to be like, that's where Jasper's like actually really helpful. He could have helped us like out of that mess earlier maybe. So and that's a kind of a way to think about it.
Hi.
Hi.
So if you run a technically heavy team with a lot of engineers, how do you prevent over-engineering? Sometimes there's tension between getting value to the user swiftly and building this complex thing.
Yeah.
Not users, engineers.
I wish I had a good answer to this question. Like, this is like the ongoing like battle, probably like in every product. I've been thinking about this a lot this week actually, because I'm like trying to figure out when I'm going to ship the thing we're working on, and it's a balancing act between like getting a couple features in that we think are really important, getting it out in a timely manner so we can actually start learning to that kind of point earlier, and like making sure the thing that we ship actually like makes sense and works well, it's well engineered, like doesn't fall over. And it's a balancing act. I think understanding again, like what are the mission critical metrics and how do the like engineering craftsmanship investments support those is really important. It's like, do we really need to build this intense piece of infrastructure in order to drive the things that we care about? Is one way to answer that question. I think a second way is like the best engineered product in the world doesn't matter if it's not the right product. And so like in this rush to get to market, like it might be amazing to build like the most robust thing, but if it turns out you're totally wrong about that thing actually solving the problem in the first place, all of that engineering effort kind of was a waste. And so reinforcing that like, hey, if we get this thing out and it turns out we're right, then we should make the investment then to scale it, but like focus on learning first and then scaling once you have product market fit.
So figuring out what your team needs from you. I've worked with about 3 different teams in my time as a PM, and they've all been different things from you. So my question is how do you figure out very quickly what each team needs from you, and do you even go down to the individual level, or you get one-on-ones on a weekly basis?
It's a good question. I mean, it sort of depends on the team. Like, I would almost turn around on you and say like, how did you figure it out? Like, some of it you learn over time. You learn people's personalities. I actually like, you can often kind of get a good sense of like who are the loud people on a team early on, and like go and solicit their feedback, solicit their understanding. Another great way to do it is to do like regular retrospectives with a team. So like some people do it on like every sprint, on like an every 2-week basis. Like sometimes I feel like that's a little overkill, and like to do it on like a monthly basis. But it's just like a look back. It's like every month the entire team gets together and it's like what's going well, what's not going well, what will we have changed, what are some things we can improve. It actually gets the entire team talking about it with one another. And it turns out like different people in the team may have different perspectives on it, but ultimately if they all as a team feel like bought into this process of helping one another rectify some of those things, it can also soften some of the like different needs of different folks in the team, if that makes sense. Kind of get them all pointed in like a shared commitment to addressing a problem in a certain way. And it's also a great way then to say like, a month later you'll have another check-in, and you can see if that thing worked or if you should actually try addressing things in a different way, and we might need something different at that point in time. Kind of like regular checkups on it is probably the single best way I could say to think about that kind of thing. Behind you there, sorry.
Hi, yeah, everybody. So my question relates to your philosophy around product management and some of the different companies that you've worked for. Like, have you seen any correlation between sort of this philosophy and how well the product is adopted, sort of, or whatever that metric is, and that promoter score, like companies who basically do this framework well, and then thereby see some sort of reaction in their users?
Yeah, it's a great question. How I would answer it, I guess, is maybe a little bit differently, at least in my career, which has been the role of products has actually been very different in the different companies I've worked for. So, like at my new place, this apartment rental search thing, it looks like a consumer apartment rental search website, but like it lived or died by the contracts being signed by like big property managers to bring their properties on our site, and so like sales really drove the show there. Like, if sales needed something to close like a deal that would get 3,000 properties on the site, we'd probably build it. Like, whether or not it was the right thing to build or not, like, you could debate, but oftentimes, it would feel like we're there to make sure like sales can do the things it says it's going to do for their clients, and that can sometimes be at odds with like, what is the thing that we would really want to do for our end users on the consumer side. I think the interesting thing about like a big company like Comcast, and it's like not really secret, actually that company's made a tremendous amount of investment in improving the consumer experience, because I think they've started really listening to their customers who have really real concerns about service delays and terrible interfaces, and they've made enormous investments in changing some of that stuff. But also if you look at that company, like what is the thing that is actually, that gets people to buy cable or not. It's like, is the stuff I want going to be on there? Like, are the shows I want to watch? And so, like, again, you can do a lot of interesting things on the product side, but maybe most of the value comes from, like, do we have the rights to the shows to display them in ways that would make a product really awesome? And one of the amazing things that's about LinkedIn, actually, that I love is that, like, the value of the company is derived from the products that we build. Like, at its heart and soul, it's not about the content, it's not about the inventory, it's literally about, like, our members engaging with one another, and if they're doing that, like, it's going to accrue all kinds of value for us as a business. And so that's kind of how I think about it. It's like, if you think about what are, like, the really big levers of value for a company, it helps you understand, like, what is the role of product and how do product decisions get made. I'm not sure if that answers your question exactly. I hope it sort of does. Yeah.
Hey, how's it going, Jasper?
Hey.
I have a 3-part question, if that's okay.
Okay.
So the first thing is, what's going well at LinkedIn? Good question. Then what could be going better? And the third question that I'm really interested is, what methodologies do you use or what tools do you use to keep track of all the progress that is going on, from the engineering part and all these different teams, so that you can keep a good sight of what's going on and to meet deadlines and stuff like that.
Cool. All right, what's going well? There are a couple of really exciting things that I think have happened at LinkedIn recently. So about a year plus ago, we relaunched our mobile app, like a kind of real modernization of our mobile app, and then about a couple months ago, I guess it was around the end of the year, we relaunched our desktop site. And one of the things that's actually amazing about this is they're both on the same stack, they're both served by the same API layer, and so, like, our ability to develop quickly has really accelerated because we can deploy experiences that are kind of at parity across both of these things at the same time in a way that we weren't able to easily do before. So we can develop things a lot faster, we can have way more consistent user experiences, and, like, be under the hood of all this stuff. Like, we can actually, from a developer productivity standpoint, like, deploy code way more rapidly than we previously could. Sometimes some products we had deployed, like, GASP, like, once every few weeks, and that when I joined the company, and now they get deployed, like, every few hours, and that's really amazing in terms of your ability to, like, iterate and build really quickly. So that's something I think is going amazingly well. I think we have a really strong strategy for what we're doing going forward. What could be going better? Like, it depends on what, like, level. I'll talk about, like, my team. Like, so no. I was like, it's like, are the people on my team going to murder me or not? I don't want to say. One of the things that's actually, like, really hard about our team is that we are in 2 geographies. So half my team is in New York, half my team is in San Francisco, and just keeping a team of, like, 45 people in sync with one another across different geographies is hard, not just from, like, a time zone difference thing, but also, like, different offices naturally have different cultures. Like, different people are there. And how do you keep a team that is that big, that diverse, in different places, like, all focused around the same thing, all looking at problems the same way? I think that is a constant iterative improvement process that, like, my engineering lead partner, and I are, like, thinking about, like, how can we help make that go better. It's an iterative process, just in the way that, like, developing projects is an iterative process, which is probably a good segue into, like, tools. Like, I know there's some people who are like, Jira is the worst, Trello is the best, Asana is meh, like, whatever. Like, the best tool is one that people are using, frankly. Like, and, like, at LinkedIn, we use Jira. And, like, are there things that are really annoying about Jira? Like, absolutely. Are there things that, like, actually work really well about Jira? Yeah. Like, the thing that's most useful about Jira is that, like, every team at LinkedIn uses Jira. And so, like, there's a lingua franca about, like, getting stuff done, and you can move tickets around really easily amongst different teams and track dependencies and things like that. So we use a lot of Jira. Use a lot of Google Sheets, frankly, like, to like, track, like, horizontal work streams and status in the way that everyone can look at it and update them every week. We use a lot of Google Docs for, like, writing strategy, collaborating, and commenting and things like that. We use Slack for real-time communication. We use way more email than I would like. Video, I mean, I can just keep going on, but, like, ultimately, it's like the tools people use are the best. And if you can get people bought into like using a tool, you can figure out a good way to use it. Yeah.
Hi, this is Ed. I'm curious, does your current team or maybe company or even previous company have a PMO, some sort of a project manager role in your team? And what works well in your experience with a project manager? Like, could be a partner, could be a PM, could be, I don't know.
Yeah. We have a role called like technical program managers. And generally the way at LinkedIn that they work is like they work on a project basis, and especially around really complex horizontal things that have a bunch of different stakeholders and different teams and different timings and things like that. They play a huge role in like getting everyone aligned, getting everyone on the same page, doing a lot of like the nitty gritty of like tracking people down, managing dependencies, making sure people are tracking things in consistent ways. Oh, great tool I forgot about, sorry, sidebar here. Weekly status updates. They're like really annoying to write sometimes, but they're actually like an incredibly useful exercise for accounting like, what did we accomplish this last week? What are the things that we're going to accomplish next week? What are like the major risks and things that we're managing we need to be aware of going in? And it is great for like creating visibility about the product, the progress of your project, but it's also actually like really good as an accounting exercise to make sure that like your team is on track because everyone knows what's going into that. Sorry, that was a total sidebar. That's another thing that program managers help us do. Yeah, like it's often in, I think some of the hardest things are bringing disparate teams, like even with LinkedIn, like the profile team and like the content experience team, which I sit on, like are in different places and they have slightly different working cadences and cultures. And they have different priorities, right? Like they're trying to solve different problems. They all funnel up to the same big problem, but they solve different problems, and helping foster alignment amongst those teams and like really facilitating that is what our program managers do and do it really well.
This goes back to kind of understanding people. If you were in product manager or associate product manager shoes, what goes into creating a kind of a compelling argument to influence someone in your position, a senior position?
Show me like what the world looks like when the thing you're building is successful. Right? Show me like convince me that the problem that you want to tackle is an important one, first of all. And then show me like why the way that you want to tackle it is actually like really thoughtful and is going to transform LinkedIn and address like the things that we know we need to do as a business. Those are the things I actually find like really compelling. The other thing is like, I actually think like, early in your career as a product manager, like apartment rental search was not like my passion, as you probably imagine. But like what I worked on at my new place was like a conversion funnel and like search traffic optimization. And it was an unbelievably valuable experience as a first product experience because you actually like, really learn like the nuts and bolts of like, how does a funnel work? Like, what does it look like? What are the right things to measure? Like, how do you run effective A/B tests? How do you kind of get forward progress and momentum? How do you manage that roadmap? And it might sound like kind of unsexy, but it's like a great way to actually like know what you're trying to do and like be making constant progress towards it. Like as you get sort of further along, like I spend more of my time like thinking kind of murky thoughts about like there's a problem we're trying to solve and it's like super squishy, you know? Like it's hard to know whether you've solved it or not. It's hard to know like whether you're measuring it in the right way. We try, but like, you know, there's always something better there. And so like showing that you can effectively take on like the small things and you know like how to make all the micro stuff work that will then funnel up into making the macro stuff work, I think is an amazing, like is a really important way to establish credibility early in your career. And like the reason I often give this advice to like early career people is to like find a kind of mature product that like it's sort of understood how it works already, is because then you can like really know that like the things that you're doing are having like the right impact. It's like, oftentimes I'll tell like early PMs at LinkedIn to like go work in like the revenue side of our business where like you know what you're doing is right if we're making more money. Like on our side, like 6 months from now we might be like, maybe what we're trying to do is actually something slightly different. We should measure it in a slightly different way. And you can spend a ton of your time investing in a product that like might not be the right one, and it's super dispiriting early in your career to like, if you've been a product manager for 2 years and everything you've built is not successful just because like there's more risk involved in the things that you're taking on. Start with the small successes early on.
Thank you, Jasper. I'm an English major, still hopeful. So as you studied literature, you remember that a lot of literature has evolved through stages, and those stages have died in certain cycles. And even a lot of literary pieces, they made it at their time, and very few make it to anthology. This tells me that every product has its own life cycle. So I would love to learn from you, when do you sense that a product has reached its peak, has started going down the hill? And then how do you develop a product with diverse inclusion? LinkedIn has kept reporting for a few years in a row now about the diversity and inclusion, which talks about the workforce demographics. But I would like to learn, how do you benefit from that diversity in product development? And if you could give us a very brief example of a time when a non-conventional experience of a member in your staff helped you pivot the product development course.
Sure. There's a lot there.
English major.
Yeah, let me think about one at a time. So, start with the product life cycle. I mean, I think there's the point where you start to see like your metrics have diminishing returns. Like no matter what you do, you can't move the thing anymore. And it doesn't mean that you should like abandon the product. Like it might mean that your product's actually like really successful, and it's just like you've hit the total like penetration of your market. Like there are no more people to get to do the thing that you want to do, and it could be like totally fine. But as a business, you're probably going to need to start doing other things too if you want to continue to grow. That is different than like you keep trying things and they just don't work. And like it could be that like your solutions are no good, or maybe like the problem wasn't worth solving in the first place, which is slightly different, right? But like the question of like knowing when to throw in the towel is like one of the hardest ones, right, around. And there are lots of reasons why things are hard. You know, some things are hard because like they're cold start problems where you just like need a lot of interconnected pieces and stuff in order for like momentum to take off, and some are like technically very challenging, and some are organizationally very challenging, perhaps. But I think like, you know, that instinct for like what's the point is that's the thing you develop over time. You start to figure out like what are the leading indicators of those things happening. And it's sort of different from product, I think. Diversity and inclusion. Yeah, so actually like the best thing for a team is a diversity of viewpoints, people with different backgrounds, people with different experiences, because it actually gives you like a far more nuanced view of the problem that you're trying to solve. And there's a weird tension here maybe, right? Because you need to figure out how to prioritize. Like you need to figure out like how do I solve the 80% problem, right? Like the thing that if I get it right, like 80% of the time it's going to work. But you should also be really mindful of the fact that for like there may be a really acute thing this does not address for a smaller portion of the population, say. So a great example of this is like we have an accessibility team at LinkedIn. And their job is to make sure that, like, in support of our mission of creating economic opportunity for every member of the global workforce, that includes people who are not sighted, who are deaf, who have other disabilities, and like making sure our products actually address their needs. And one of the amazing things that they've done that I think has actually kind of colored our product development experience is they do these office hours every so often, and we took the entire team and we went down to the office hours, and we actually like start using some of the technology that they use to make our products more accessible. So like, what is it like to use a screen reader? What is it like to actually have like a mouse that is operated by the movement of your head if you don't necessarily have control of your hands? And all of a sudden you start to see your products from different lights. It's like, oh, like the controls we built into this video player like would never work for these things because they require way too much precision. Or like, we're not actually like doing things like adequately labeling our interfaces so that that if you're blind, you could have a screen reader that like could read out what these controls are, what they do. And I think like that has been a pretty profound experience, especially when you think about something like video, which is like a visual medium. Like, how do you make sure that's accessible to people who may not have that same ability? And yeah, like actually the head of our accessibility team is blind, and understanding how he uses our products has like a huge, profound impact on how we develop as a company.
Hi, I'm Sam from UC Berkeley, and I have 3 questions. First question is, can you give like a real life example for capturing matrix for a successful product? And the second question is, can you just what would be a best movie title that describe your job as a product manager? Third question is, I like your presentation. I think there's a lot of lesson learned, and I was wondering if you are flexible or open to share your wisdom of nuggets over email maybe or LinkedIn. Thank you.
Yeah, cool. One at a time. Example of some metrics. So like, I can tell you about some of the metrics that we think about like for video on LinkedIn. We believe that if we have great video, people will be watching it. Like the best indicator that someone finds this valuable is that they decide to invest their time, which is a limited resource, in spending it watching this, which is time that they are not doing something else. And so like we track total time watched. Like we think it's an important metric. Is it the be-all end-all metric? Like no, it's not perfect. Like there's other things that actually like matter to make sure that things circulate in our social ecosystem and that like people are watching different things, they're watching the right things. But at the highest level, like yeah, it's a pretty good like approximation of like are people getting value out of this thing. So that's like one example of that. And one of the things that's cool about it is like it's pretty obvious in certain ways to the team like what you can do to move it. It's like you get more videos, you get more people watching video, that will increase that. Like, so can you increase the breadth of people that we have videos that is relevant to? Do videos load faster? Like, the faster you can get a video to load, the more likely someone will be to play it. And the more likely, if they're more likely to play it, they're more likely to give it some time to understand, like, is it worth watching and maybe get, like, invested in it. So, it's like another way to kind of think about the team basically being like, we know what to do in order to drive this method. Movie title, like, this is, I want to say something funny, but I actually, like, nothing comes to mind. Pass. Wisdom and nuggets. Follow me on Twitter. Follow me on LinkedIn. I write occasionally long-form blog on LinkedIn. I try to share useful things. You can be the judge. Those are the best ways. I'm trying to evangelize following on LinkedIn. I say that for the following reason. It's like, it's something that we introduced in the content ecosystem a while back, with the notion of like connections to people that you really know. And there might be people you don't know, but you really want to hear from them and you want to learn from them. And so this is my plug for like, when you see someone who's interesting, like make a decision of whether you're going to connect with them or follow them. If you have something to say and you want to interact with them on a regular basis, like connection is probably the right thing. If you just kind of like want to like listen in and see what they have to say, start with following, and then maybe if you start commenting a lot on what they're doing and you decide you kind of form a relationship about that, maybe you level it up to connecting. I don't know. I'm workshopping this idea.
All right, I have 2 more questions, so here and there.
Okay, so the reason I don't use LinkedIn daily is because people are way too self-promotional on LinkedIn, and that tips the ratio of signal to noise unbearably in favor of noise. So I was curious about how you thought about solving that particular problem, because it seems like a sticky one.
Indeed it is. It's a hard one. Like, it's a really hard one. And it's something, like, by the way, that like we think about literally every single day. And we talk about for a long time every single day. I think one of the things that I believe is that, like, one of the things, and this is the reason I joined LinkedIn, like, in the first place, which is that in a universe in which like there's no friction involved in like getting your voice out there, like, the best way to incentivize people to say meaningful, useful things is if it can actually help them in some very concrete way. And you might say like the self-promotion stuff is like the logical extreme of that. But ultimately, like if you are actually having like meaningful conversations with people, like that is the best form of brand building. Like, I don't believe that like you're a successful brand builder if you're just like constantly saying like, here's my talking gig, like here's this thing, I have a webinar coming up next Thursday. Like, that's not like, no one's ever gotten a job by putting a bunch of stuff out there and just like waiting for people to come to them. You do that by actually like developing meaningful relationships with people, and I think if you like look at the original vision for LinkedIn from Reid Hoffman and Alan Blue, one of the founders who's still there. It's all about like the magic of the offline network. How can you recreate that online? And it's all based on like actually having real interactions with people. To me, like making sure we do the things in our product that actually encourage that's how we address that. And it's a long, hard road, but that's kind of how we think about it. Like that to me is the best way of building brand, is to actually have real, meaningful impact.
Right. Next question.
Yeah, hi. My question is that the product is all about solving people's problem, and then how do you incorporate business into it? So, for example, we are building a social network of mothers where we solve their anxiety and stress doubts, and it's a peer-to-peer platform. So, as a mother, you can solve other mothers' problem. So, it's a forum where mothers can ask questions anonymously, and others can help them finding the answers. Now, to incorporate business into it, we have made another feature, a feed for them, where other businesses push their content, and through that we basically generate revenue. But that thing is not actually the problem of the user. The problem of the user is to ask questions and get answers as soon as possible. So then how do you make a product in such a way that it helps businesses to get revenues, and at the same time the user's problem getting solved at a faster rate?
I mean, I think so in these kinds of ecosystems, right, where like businesses want to get in front of users, right? You always need to focus on the users first. Because if users aren't coming there, if users aren't engaged, like there's nothing to sell to businesses. It's not like users, like if users are paying for the thing themselves, like it's kind of a different ecosystem. But like you need to think always of making sure you're doing the right thing for the user first. Because if they're coming every single day or whatever the right cadence is for your product, and they're highly engaged, like you will find a way. There will be people who want to get in front of those. Like they will be there, but I like to think of the users first. You also kind of like have a sense of like what kind of like app or business are we building? Like, is it something that is like huge mass market, in which case like advertising is an amazing solution. And if advertising is going to be a solution, you need as many people as like humanly possible probably looking at your thing if you want this to scale. If it's really niche but really valuable, like maybe people will pay for access to this community, and you don't actually need to solve this problem of like how do you have these diverse misaligned incentives between, like sometimes misaligned incentives between users and paying customers. I think like figuring out exactly what that overlap looks like is kind of the key, and there's certain kinds of products that lend themselves to different monetization models. But you sort of can like never really go wrong by focusing on a user problem first, because if you focus on a user problem and you can scale to a bunch of users, like you'll figure out probably a way to inject the right monetization.
Thank you so much. Yes, sir. That was great.